You figure you make about 50 cents on every time you sell a paperback. At 50 cents a paperback, you have to sell, I'm not good at math, but a ton of books to make a job's worth of a living. That pressure can make you write crap on purpose in an attempt to sort of James Pattersonize yourself, although I like James Patterson. I will defend James Patterson if anyone wants, so we can do that later if you want. I don't think he's a good writer, but I like reading the books. He doesn't write them, so I don't have to think he's a good writer. Anyway, I think it's good to study broadly in life. I think that it helps you in life. I think that the point of being a person is to learn how to think and also to learn what to think about. Like, we have these weird, massively parallel brains, and we're going to use them for something. And a lot of times we're going to use them to think about the arrest record of Lindsay Lohan, but hopefully sometimes we will use them to think about things that are interesting. And it's really helpful to have a broad education to know what's interesting. I also think that, like Kurt Vonnegut was a chemist or an engineer. You know, William Carlos Williams was a doctor. There is no career that precludes you from writing. I manage databases and weighted tables. And, you know, I liked both those jobs. I would still be having, I still have the job where I was managing the database at that magazine Booklist, but my wife made me move to Indianapolis, so. Does that answer your question? Oh, how did I get my start as a writer? That was right. No, it didn't answer your question. I didn't even begin to address it. Well, I was working in this magazine managing databases, and I studied English in college, but I didn't study writing at all. And I also majored in religious studies, and I knew a lot about the Islamic world, which was not that useful of a topic on September 10th, 2001, but then all of a sudden it was useful. And this magazine that I worked at, Booklist, didn't have anyone who knew a lot about Islam, so they asked me to review the books about Islam, and that paid like $10 a review, and I reviewed a lot of books. And then my reviews were good enough that I got to review other books. I got to review young adult novels and even some adult novels. And that was really my start. And then I got a second sort of parallel start because there was a writer I really liked who was just starting out. That is the time to try to get a writer to notice you, by the way, when she or he is just starting out. This writer named Amy Krouse Rosenthal, who has now become very successful. And I just thought that she was hilarious. And I emailed her, and I didn't have any intentions or anything. I just wanted her to know that I thought that she was hilarious. And it was only like the 4th piece of fan mail she'd ever gotten. That's the time to get someone. And she wrote back and she said, your email was very funny. And I said, thank you. And I wrote her back and I tried to write her another funny email. And then she said, that email was very funny as well. Do you have anything that's 2 minutes long that I could put on the radio? And I said, yes. And then I went home and I wrote something. I wrote a piece about all my ex-girlfriends, like Googling my ex-girlfriends relentlessly and what they were all doing now. This was before Googling was a thing. So the idea that you could like Google people you knew was still relatively new. It's impossible for you to imagine you were all 5. And that was my start. I got a second radio gig and then a third radio gig. That whole time I was writing Looking for Alaska. As far as books go, I started the same way most of the people I know who publish books started, which was that I sent my book in to people in New York hoping that they would read it, and finally one of them did. And they liked it, and that was the story. I mean, that's the story for most people. It's just a struggle to get an agent, and then once you have an agent, you try to sell the book, and yeah. As far as actually getting an agent, I don't recommend you do that in high school. We can talk about why if you want. Other questions? Yes?
Do you ever have problems like focusing on one book?
Do I ever have problems focusing on one book? Not until recently, but thank you for bringing that up. No, I never did, but now I do. I had a lot of problems focusing on a single story or finishing a story of any length, longer than like 100 words, when I was in high school and in college, which I think is good. You get bored with the story because you're supposed to write another one because you're learning. I don't know if you guys have heard that Malcolm Gladwell thing, that it takes 10,000 hours to become an expert at anything. Mm-hmm. I think that that's kind of a made-up statistic, but it takes a lot of hours at any rate. And if it's 10,000, that would mean 40 hours a week for like 2 years, I think. So that's a lot of writing. you know, that it takes to get good at writing. Maureen Johnson, who is my secret sister and has been one of the vlog brothers while I've been on paternity leave hanging out with my son, just made a video in which she points out that you don't like go to the violin store, buy a violin, and then expect to be very good at playing the violin the next day. You know, and so I think a lot of when I was writing in high school and in college and starting stories and not finishing them, I was figuring out how to start a story that could be finished. And there's nothing wrong with that. The problem that I have now is, yeah, I don't know how to choose. I've chosen, finally, but I was having a terrible time. I was going back and forth between stories, which isn't a good. Some people do that very well. I don't. So I was having a really hard time. But I think I'm running out of time, so that decides it for me. Yes?
I don't really know what you're working on right now, maybe your new book, but I was just wondering, since one of your favorite authors just died and you just had a new son that was born, I was wondering if that like influenced you in any way in what you're writing, and if so, how?
It's a good question. Well, I mean, Salinger has been functionally dead for a long time. J.D. Salinger's role in my life isn't to, you know, make me pancakes or go out to dinner with me or even be, you know, someone I call on the phone because I have a duty to because they're my great uncle or whatever. You know, he's just a guy who wrote some books and it was clear that he wasn't going to write more. So he died, as far as I'm concerned, in like, you know, 1962. Which is not to say that, like, and then he went on and he had another life that was very separate from me, which was what he wanted, and that's cool. He didn't want to be friends, clearly. I was very sad. I mean, I was very sad when I heard of his death. I would like there to be more books about the Glass family, and this is the only way we'll ever read them if there are, is by his dying. So, but I was very sad because it's just a point in the life of those books, an interesting point in the life of a book. Whenever an author dies, whenever there's a classic book and the author of it dies, you begin to wonder, is this book going to be relevant for 100 years or is it on its way out? That kind of thing. I mean, Salinger's effect on my writing is pretty obvious and probably annoyingly obvious at times, and that will continue. I don't think there's anyone who knows how to write about smart teenagers as well as he did and who understands how to write about smart teenagers for smart teenagers, which is really my only ambition in life. So I will copy him until I die, I guess, or until they won't publish me anymore. That was an accident. Okay. Now I see how that happens to politicians, though. You know, because you just want to be close to people, and then you get too close. And then as far as my son goes, I'm trying to not let it affect me as a writer, but I'm sure it will as I get older and he gets older. Right now, he's pretty, you know, he's really cute and a lot of fun to be around, but he's not influencing my ideas very deeply because all he does is poop. Yeah, not yet, anyway. It'll be interesting to see. I mean, I don't want it to make me soft or to make me kind of cowardly. I think that's a risk that people who write the kinds of books that I write run. And I don't want to do that.